You know, most folks dream of a quiet life, a peaceful street, a place where your biggest worry is whether the mail arrived. For me, that dream was Meadowbrook Estates, a community promising manicured lawns and, more importantly, peace. I'm Arthur Finch, and my passion, my sanctuary, is miniature dioramas. Not your kids' toy sets, mind you, but painstakingly accurate historical scenes. From the Battle of Thermopylae in 1/72nd scale to a meticulously rendered Victorian London street, every tiny brick, every miniature figure, is a testament to precision and patience. My workshop. Just my garage, kept cleaner than most people's kitchens. It's quiet work, solitary, the kind of pursuit that asks nothing of anyone else. Or so I thought. The first notice arrived like a misplaced leaflet tucked under my doormat. It was polite, almost apologetic, regarding excessive packaging waste at 14 Elmwood Drive. Signed by a new name, Brenda Sterling, HOA President. I chuckled. Must be the occasional large box of specialized resin or tiny laser-cut wood. I crumpled it up, tossed it, and returned to my Roman legionnaires. A minor misstep, nothing more. But a week later, the politeness vanished. The envelope was thicker, the paper stiff, the font accusatory. Formal notice of unapproved commercial activity, code 7.3. B. It cited increased vehicular traffic from delivery vans and disruption of residential aesthetics. A fleeting glimpse of a diorama being carefully loaded into a courier van. This one demanded immediate cessation of all operations, threatening fines. My brow furrowed. Commercial activity. This was my art, my livelihood, yes, but it was all handled quietly, professionally, from my own property. My traffic amounted to a few pickups a week. This was new. This was Brenda Sterling. I started noticing her then. A pristine white luxury SUV, polished to a gleam, began cruising the streets of Meadowbrook with increasing frequency. It was almost always Brenda behind the wheel, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows like tiny, angry caterpillars planning world domination, set in a permanent frown of inspection. She'd slowed down near my house. Mildred, her HOA secretary, perched beside her, diligently scribbling on a clipboard. Brenda would stare pointedly, sometimes even taking photos. Once, I had my garage door slightly ajar, just to let in some air, and she pulled up, her smile plastered on, a cheap veneer over a house of cards. She didn't say a word, just surveyed my neat workbench, then drove off. It was unsettling. Then came the drone. I was in my backyard, taking a rare break, when I heard the distinct buzz. Looking up, there it was, hovering just above my roofline, its camera lens unblinking. The next day, another notice. This one with aerial photos of my open garage, a box truck, even a blurry image of a partially constructed diorama visible inside. This time, the fines began to stack up. Not $100. This was $500, then $1,000 per day. Brenda had, quite unilaterally, established a new community, aesthetics and traffic enforcement committee, giving herself unprecedented power. It was like living under the gaze of a suburban panopticon, her approach pervasive and increasingly irritating, like an unskippable ad. I tried to reason with her. I attended an HOA meeting, politely explaining the nature of my business, my minimal impact, my commitment to quiet. Brenda cut me off, citing the sanctity of residential harmony and the potential devaluation of our esteemed properties. She even subtly implied that my business might attract undesirables, meaning, I suppose, delivery drivers. The community room was packed, but silent, cowed. It was clear Brenda had everyone else intimidated, and they had reason to be. Whispers started circulating. Arbitrary lawn height notices, unapproved garden gnome citations, warnings about children playing too loudly in their own yards. Brenda seemed to be on a crusade, armed with a rulebook she'd seemingly rewritten herself. One afternoon, Mildred actually measured the height of Mrs. Chun's decorative birdbath, claiming it distracted from uniformity. The absurdity of it all was breathtaking, yet terrifying. The final straw arrived with the ominous title, Final Cease and Desist, Order and Notice of Impending Legal Action. It wasn't just a threat anymore, it was a promise. Brenda was suing me for breach of covenants, demanding punitive damages all over my quiet, lawful, and frankly, beautiful work. That's when I decided, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I remembered my friend, a grizzled old-timer, telling me about his HOA horror story and how he fought back. Sometimes, he'd said, you just gotta strategically and legally burn it all down to build something better. I knew where to start. Brenda was so fixated on money and property values, there had to be a financial angle. One submitted a formal, legally binding request for all HOA financial records, meeting minutes, and contractor invoices for the past 2 years. They stalled, of course. Weeks went by. But when my lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, sent a follow-up with the implicit threat of a court order, the documents arrived. Heavily redacted, but they arrived. I spent days poring over them, every number, every line item. My meticulous nature usually reserved for painting a diorama figure's single eyelash, now focused on figures of a different kind. And that's when the red flags started waving. Massive, inflated invoices for community landscaping upgrades. These were vastly higher than any market rate, and every single major contract, every single one, went to a newly formed company, Sterling Green and Gardens. The descriptions of work were vague, generic. A quick online search for Sterling Green and Gardens led me to a P.O. box address and a registered agent, Brenda Sterling. And digging deeper, I found out the company had only been incorporated 6 months ago, and the actual owner was Brenda's nephew, fresh out of college with no prior landscaping experience. This wasn't an HOA. This was a private piggy bank with a rulebook cover, and Brenda was filling it through a classic kickback scheme. Her perfect smile, once a cheap veneer, was about to crack. I took everything to Sarah Jenkins, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney a neighbor had quietly recommended. Sarah, with her piercing gaze and dry wit, listened patiently, flipping through my meticulously organized binders. "Arthur," she said, her voice calm but firm, "this isn't just harassment. This is fraud. Embezzlement. This woman isn't just an overzealous Karen. She's running a criminal operation masked as neighborhood control." Sarah advised me to keep documenting everything. We set up hidden cameras, not for a nefarious purpose, but to capture Brenda's relentless patrols. And boy, did they capture. There was the instance where she tried to physically block a delivery truck from entering my driveway, citing excessive vehicle weight. The driver just stared at her in disbelief. Or the numerous times she'd stride up to my property line, phone in hand, snapping photos. We started quietly talking to other homeowners. It turned out many had similar stories. Several had been recommended, read, pressured to use Sterling Green and Gardens for their own landscaping needs. They recounted unusually high quotes and shoddy, often unfinished work. Mrs. Higgins showed me an invoice for seasonal shrub trimming that cost more than her annual mortgage payment. Mr. Davies revealed he'd paid for weed abatement, only to have more weeds appear 2 weeks later. The outrage was simmering just below the surface of their fear. Then Martha, a sweet, elderly lady who'd served on the HOA board for years before Brenda's arrival, came to me, her dog's tail wagging with the enthusiastic power of a small, happy engine. She'd overheard Brenda talking to Mildred. Martha brought me a stack of old HOA meeting minutes and internal emails from before Brenda's election. These documents showed regular, competitive bids for landscaping, transparent discussions about genuine community improvements, all of which had been abruptly abandoned when Brenda took the helm. Martha had quietly observed Brenda's tyranny, but my struggle had pushed her to speak out. "Don't let it happen again, Arthur," she'd whispered, echoing an old sentiment I'd heard about in other HOA tales. "This community deserves better." The final blow came in the form of a foreclosure notice. Brenda was moving to seize my home, claiming unpaid and escalating fines totaled over $30,000. It was an audacious, brazen move, but it was also her biggest mistake. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It was the entire community's. This petty tyranny had become a full-blown assault on their homes too. The message was clear. If she could do this to Arthur, she could do it to anyone. The annual HOA meeting was set for a sweltering Tuesday night. The community clubhouse was packed, an unusual turnout. Brenda, radiating false confidence, stood at the podium. She planned to introduce a series of new, even more restrictive bylaws, including one that would effectively ban all home-based businesses and allow for more. Aggressive property inspections, a thinly veiled excuse for more surveillance. She probably even planned to propose another community improvement project, another opportunity for Sterling Green and Gardens to rake in cash. "Good evening, esteemed residents," Brenda began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Her smile was still plastered on, but I knew the cracks were showing underneath. "I trust we're all here tonight to ensure the continued excellence and rising property values of Meadowbrook Estates. First on the agenda, a slight modification to our commercial activity clause." That was my cue. I stood up with Sarah by my side. The murmurs began. "Madam President," I said, my voice steady before we discuss new bylaws, "I believe there are some existing matters that require our immediate attention." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Finch, this is not the time for personal grievances. We have an agenda." "This isn't personal, Madam President," Sarah interjected, stepping forward. "This is about the integrity of this homeowners association and the financial well-being of every single resident here." I began, calmly, methodically. I detailed the escalating fines, the harassment, the drone surveillance. I spoke about the privacy invasions, the constant monitoring. Then I shifted to the financials. I projected enlarged copies of the inflated invoices. I showed the bank statements, the transfers to Sterling Green and Gardens. And then I displayed the incorporation documents, clearly linking Brenda Sterling to the company and its owner, her nephew. A gasp went through the room. Brenda's composure, that brittle veneer, began to visibly crack. Her plastered smile faltered. "This is slander," she shrieked, her voice rising. "This is baseless defamation. Mr. Finch is simply upset because he refuses to comply with community standards." Mildred, her pen poised over her notepad, looked like a deer in headlights. Sarah calmly stepped forward. "Mrs. Sterling, these are public records. And the fines levied against Mr. Finch, which led to a wrongful foreclosure notice, conveniently coincided with the inflated payments to your nephew's company. This isn't slander. It's a clear pattern of embezzlement and conflict of interest, a violation of both HOA bylaws and state law." Then came the clincher. I played the recording. It was Brenda's voice, harsh and imperious, lecturing Mrs. Chen about her birdbath. Then, subtly, but relentlessly, pushing her to use Sterling Green and Gardens for her yard. It was a chilling display of her true nature. The murmur turned into an uproar. Residents began shouting, sharing their own stories of being pressured or overcharged. "She charged me double for new sod," cried one. "My fine for overgrown hedges was outrageous," yelled another. Then, Mr. Henderson, a quiet, respected elder resident who had lived in Meadowbrook for 50 years, stood up. His voice, usually soft, resonated through the room. "We didn't elect a dictator. We elected a representative," he declared, his gaze fixed on Brenda. "And sometimes, all it takes is a united front to remind them who they truly serve. This stops tonight." It was like a dam breaking. A motion for a vote of no confidence was immediately raised. It passed overwhelmingly. Brenda Sterling, her face a mask of disbelief and sputtering fury, was ousted from her position. She stormed out, Mildred scurrying behind her, clipboard still clutched in hand. The aftermath was swift and satisfying. The Financial Crimes Division was immediately notified. An investigation into Brenda Sterling and Sterling Green & Gardens began, leading to charges of embezzlement and fraud. Brenda faced serious legal consequences, losing not only her HOA power but her reputation and eventually her freedom. A new interim board was elected, comprised of honest, community-minded residents. They promised transparency, accountability, and a return to the true spirit of Meadowbrook Estates. HOA dues were reevaluated, ridiculous fines rescinded, and legitimate contractors are hired. The oppressive atmosphere lifted. The community felt lighter, a palpable sense of camaraderie and mutual respect replacing the fear that Brenda had instilled. People started waving to each other again, stopping for casual chats. My business, Arthur's Miniatures, flourished. I became a quiet hero in the neighborhood, a symbol of resilience and integrity. Neighbors commissioned dioramas of their own homes, of favorite local landmarks. I finally put up a small, tasteful sign outside my garage, depicting a tiny diorama. It was a quiet act of defiance, a badge of honor. Deliveries still came, but now they were seen as a sign of success, not a nuisance. It's a stark reminder. Power, even the tiny, insignificant power of an HOA presidency, can corrupt if left unchecked. But when ordinary people, armed with facts, determination, and perhaps a good lawyer, decide to stand up, even the most entrenched suburban tyrant can be toppled. Sometimes you have to strategically and legally burn it all down to build something better. And that, my friends, is how a quiet craftsman, fueled by passion and pushed too far, became the unexpected catalyst for justice in Meadowbrook Estates.